Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to talk about the movies. Thanks for joining us for episode 19 of The Movie Proposal. I am Skye Jitani. Joining me, as always, is Josh Lindsay.
Hey, everybody.
And Jason Rugg is flipping buttons over here.
I am Groot.
All right.
I wanted to do it last week, but you didn't introduce me last week.
I'm
so
sorry.
ruined
So you're
everything.
kind of behind me.
I had it planned.
I can't see you in my peripheral
you
vision.
can
All right.
turn.
Well, the cameras, you set the cameras up. All right. Anyway, this week's episode is being brought to you by What's Wrong with Religion? 9 Things No One Told You About Faith. Just released by Skye Pilot Media, my new book. If you haven't seen it yet or heard us talk about it on the Phil Vischer podcast, this book is unlike anything you've ever seen before.
Agreed.
Highly illustrated. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see as I flip through the pages all the wonderful artwork. It is now out. The best place to get it is at what'swrongwithreligion.com. You can also get it on Amazon. Amazon currently is saying that it will ship in 1 to 2 months. Don't believe them. That is not true. You can get it much sooner than that. I don't know why Amazon has got some problems right now, but you can definitely get it from what'swrongwithreligion.com. Yeah, maybe in a future episode we can talk more about this.
No, I've read the first 2 chapters. They're fantastic.
Thank you very much, Josh. But we're not here to talk about my book, although it's why we are presenting it, because we need you to go buy it so that we can keep doing podcasts like this. We're here to talk about the movies.
Yes.
So something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. Let's hear it. What have you got for something old?
Okay, something old. I just watched this fairly recently with my youngest 2, my 10-year-old and 7-year-old, Cloak and Dagger.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Do you know that one?
I do. I mean, that was one of my
right.
favorites when I was a kid.
Yes, 1984. Henry Thomas, who's famous for E.T.
Mm-hmm.
Dabney Coleman, who I don't know what else he's been in, but
he's been in a ton of things.
Right,
Yeah.
right, a ton
a
of
lot
stuff.
of TV also.
Yes, and it's very dated. It is pretty cheesy, and I didn't think my kids would buy into it, but they loved it.
Really?
Yes, and I was surprised.
I
And-
probably have not seen it since I was 8 or 10 years old.
Well, right, and you do watch it, and it's amazing what they got away with in terms of believability and so forth. But the premise is Henry Thomas he's probably 12, 13, 14, somewhere around there, and he's a real imaginative kid. His mom died in the last year or two. His father's...
Is this a Disney movie?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't think
remember.
so.
All right.
It's like TriStar or something like that.
All
But
right.
remember that horse running in?
Right, yeah.
Okay. The mom died. The father's very busy, having a tough time being a single dad. So the boy's left to his on his own quite often. Mm-hmm. And so, like me, I mean, I did the same thing he did. I pretended I was always in a spy movie or something where you're on some adventure and you get your backpack and your toy gun, and he's kind of like the boy who cries wolf, where he tells everyone about some crazy adventure story, but then what happens is a real crazy adventure happens where a guy who gets shot and he's got secret plans, and it happens to be in a video game cartridge. He dies in the arms of this kid just because wrong place, wrong time. And so now this kid's telling people about it, but no one believes him.
Yeah.
And so now he's really on a mission to stop the bad guys. And anyway, fun adventure. The dad, and once again, there's the whole dad element in there, and the dad becomes the hero at the end. But a really sweet story, fun family
Where
adventure.
did you find it?
Oh, that's a good question.
Was it on a Netflix streaming service?
No,
kind of thing?
I think we have like the low cable option, but it comes with HBO.
Okay.
And I think it was on HBO.
Huh. Because sometimes you stumble across an old movie like that when you're looking at Hulu or Netflix or whatever, and
Right.
I can't remember ever bumping into that movie.
No, I'm pretty sure it was HBO.
That's a blast from the past.
It was.
All right. Well, my something old is very different. Fits more with what we're going to do in something new, and that is the classic 1982 film Gandhi.
I've never seen that.
Oh, okay.
I know I've always said I should sit down and watch this 5-hour film. How long is it?
It is. I don't know.
Isn't it like 3 hours?
It's long. Yeah. 3 hours and 11 minutes.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a long film. But I first saw this, I don't know when, probably when I was a teenager. And for those who don't know, my father's from India. I've been to India many times. And so there's kind of that connection with...
So it was required viewing.
It wasn't required, but it was, my own interest. Okay. And just last week, my oldest daughter, who's in high school, she's doing her finals right now, and she's been really enjoying, I think she's taking Western civilization. And we were out to lunch the other day and talking about what parts of the class she's enjoyed most, and she was talking about colonialism and kind of what happened in Africa and India and those places in the wake of European colonialism. And we started talking about the movie Gandhi, which she needs to see soon. And it just reminded me that not only is it a brilliant movie, Richard Attenborough was the director. Ben Kingsley plays Gandhi, and I believe got an Oscar for Best Actor.
Sounds right.
Yeah. If I recall, it was the same year that Tootsie came out.
Okay. Oh, well, that one, did it win Best Picture?
I don't think so. But I remember that Dustin Hoffman was up against Ben Kingsley for Best Actor.
Who won?
Ben Kingsley.
Oh, okay.
And if it was today, it would totally be... it would totally be Dustin Hoffman. Anyway, not only is it a wonderful historical picture about the independence of India from Great Britain in 1947, but it gives you, if a lot of people just have no understanding of kind of cultural, political realities in India and Pakistan and that whole part of the world, which is now playing such a huge role in issues of global terrorism and just all that's going on in the Middle East. And although this is South Asia, not really the Middle East, it's all interrelated in some way or another. It helps you get an understanding of the dynamics. And beyond that, it's just a brilliant movie. Gandhi's a fascinating figure. I've read a ton about him. People have sainted him literally in India. He's a very complicated character, but this portrayal is just moving and beautiful, and it helps you understand just how deeply troubling European colonialism was, even though a lot of Europeans would say it was done with the best of intentions. And a lot of Christians tend to kind of implicitly bless colonialism because, well, we brought Christianity to all these parts of the world, and isn't that good and all that. Okay, fine, that is good, but there was a lot of damage that was done in the process, and I think that movie kind of highlights some of the danger. And the other thing that's really brilliant about it is it highlights the nonviolent philosophy that Gandhi used in order to free India from the British. And in an age where we are increasingly buying into the idea that the only way to change things is through aggression, it's a reminder that there is actually enormous power in non-aggression when leveraged properly. So anyway, I can't recommend that movie enough. It's one of my favorite movies. It's phenomenal. And yeah, so Gandhi, 1982.
Is it available on anything streaming?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, you can always rent it.
Yeah,
from
we'll go to the library,
iTunes or whatever. But because it's a period piece too, it's sort of timeless. Whereas you watch Cloak and Dagger, which is probably set in 1983 or whatever, 84, it looks really dated. It looks really kind of cheesy. Whereas when you're doing a period piece like this one, which is set in the early 20th century up through probably about 1950, it looks timeless, which is great. So it plays just as well today, and there's no special effects. So you don't have to worry about that either.
All right.
Yeah, so really, really, really worth watching. Fantastic film, and not just for history buffs like me.
All right, we're going to check it out.
All right, something new. Give us the backdrop on the film we're talking about.
All right, so we're talking about Lion, which came out at the end of 2016, wide release in beginning of 2017. Nominated for 6 Oscars. Here's the premise. Based on the true story of a 5-year-old Indian boy who gets lost in the streets of Calcutta, thousands of kilometers from home. He survives many challenges before being adopted by a couple in Australia, and then 25 years later, he sets out to find his lost family. And
Right.
you just watched it this week?
Yes.
Okay, so I watched it last night.
It's very fresh. I watched it, in the last 24 hours.
Great.
Also.
Okay. All right. So
Very, very fresh.
I'm going to go first again.
Okay.
All right. I come to this podcast so I can hear your proposal. I'm very interested to hear yours on this, but this is my proposal. I propose that Lion is a great example of how good filmmaking can move hearts and cause people to take action.
All right.
So this was an event for our family. Like, we had to schedule it. When's everyone going to be home? Can we watch it before kids go to bed? All that kind of stuff. Someone's got to pick up at Redbox and so on. We researched, can the whole family watch it, and all that kind of stuff. And there was discussion about the film prior to it. And then and what happens in this, there's just a story of adoption. It's very moving, and I think everyone cried during this film. But then the film ended, and there was continued discussion about it. Oh, we should adopt a kid. Oh, maybe we should look into fostering. Right? I think we're going to get a dog this summer. We'll look into fostering soon after. Anyway, but I was on websites looking at, because this film actually promoted, a website where you can go see multiple organizations that are helping kids in India, and so and I would not have seen this film or been moved to have these kinds of discussions with my kids had this film not done so well or been as good as it is.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about the Oscars and how, it's kind of silly or political or, stupid. But I do like watching the Oscars, and whatever they bring attention to, I'm curious to find out more about. And because it was such a great film, and because it got so much buzz and was nominated for so many things, we were intrigued, and it led to having these discussions. And being a Christian, one thing that jumps out to me is just the approach of filmmaking, where are we making art for the sake of art, or do we have a message first, and then how can we get it out to the masses, and usually you have something that's not good, but it reminded me of in college. My freshman year of college, I was at a public university. Every year they have a skit competition, and they pair up student organizations, and it's mostly sororities and fraternities and so on. But there was one Christian organization that was participating, and they won hands down. It was the funniest, most original, best, hands down, by a long shot. And it had nothing to do with Christianity or anything like that. It was just a very entertaining performance piece. And I called home about it. As soon as I was done, I was like, Mom, this was the most amazing thing. But what it did was it caused me to want to meet those people because they were very good at what they did. And then later I was involved in actually creating videos and dramas that were, actually part of church services and spread the message, the gospel message and things like that. But I just think what it made me think of was the approach of that film is an art form in of itself, and you take a great story like the story that's in Lion, and it moves people.
Well, what you're describing is the difference between art that inspires and propaganda that manipulates. So I think a lot of evangelical, this is going to be an overstatement, but I'll say it anyway. A lot of evangelicalism is very good at propaganda. We're not very good at art. And propaganda is we're going to hit you over the head with our agenda and our message and try to manipulate you into acting the way we want you to act. Whereas art is more subtle, it's more beautiful, but it can be just as effective.
Right.
And it touches something that is true and good and beautiful, that awakens in us a desire to act, a desire to respond. And that's what Jesus' parables really did in a lot of ways. It wasn't propaganda, it was subtle and indirect. And those are values that just don't have a strong tradition in American evangelicalism. But when it's done right, like in this film, and not that this is done from a Christian point of view, it's really, really well done.
Agreed. Yeah. And I thought, like when we saw Guardians of the Galaxy with my kids, I took my kids to see it, another kind of family event. We saw the film. What'd you guys think? They liked it. What was your favorite part? They told me, and then ended discussion.
Right.
But here, as a family, there was crying going on well after the movie had ended, and just discussions about it and so forth, which I think is great. And I have memories of watching films with my parents, that weren't just Star Wars or whatever, but it was impactful, and I still carry that with me today. And so who knows what seeds were planted, but I love the film. It's definitely worth watching. And
well, let me give you my proposal.
Let's hear it.
Which now I want to keep talking about this because you're touching on some things. So my proposal is, I propose that Lion illustrates the very worst about humanity and the very best about humanity. And that makes it a movie worth talking about.
Oh, yeah.
I will confess, I wept like John Boehner at this movie. It really hit me. And I think for a couple of reasons. It isn't, What? I did. It was very, very moving, and I watched it by myself. My family's not watched it, I really want them to now. And part of the reason I think it hit me so much, especially the first, I don't know, 40 minutes of the movie or however long it is, when they depict the little boy losing his family and wandering the streets and all the things that he encounters, is, I have seen that kid thousands of times. I have been to India. I know exactly what those streets are like. I know what those street kids are like. When they show that group of kids sleeping on cardboard in the train station, I've seen that. Like, I mean, none of these scenes in the movie are in any way exaggerated. It's exactly what it's like. So we are so isolated from that reality. And you see later in the film when he's living as an adult in Australia, he's having this tension between remembering the poverty that he grew up in and what his family is probably still facing, and the comfort that he has in an affluent Western society. Like, there's such a disconnect. But when you go there and you realize that this is the day in and day out reality for millions and millions of people, you just feel it in a completely different way than when it's on a screen or when it's theoretical. And the reason I want my kids to watch this is they've been there. They've walked those streets. They've interacted with street kids. They know the stories that are being told in this film. They've seen it up front too. So on that level, it's just absolutely heartbreaking. And you see how many times this young boy could have ended up in far worse circumstances, right? Being trafficked and enslaved and all that. It's just heartbreaking. And there's a natural, when I was watching the film, I was thinking about the prodigal son story, right? Where obviously in that parable from Luke 15, the son voluntarily leaves home and goes off and lives wildly. But it's also a story about homecoming. And in this film, the boy doesn't leave because he's being rebellious or because it's a reminder that sometimes we are estranged from God because of our own stupid, selfish, sinful instincts and desires. But there's a lot of evil in this world which isn't our fault, which is just circumstantial, and it's as heartbreaking and to God as it is to us. So that's kind of what this film illustrates. When he's, the other part that really got me, the really beautiful part, there's many beautiful parts of this movie, but when he's an adult and he's talking to his adoptive mother, Nicole Kidman plays her, and she adopted two boys from India. The one played by Dev Patel, who grows up to be more or less well-adjusted and functioning, and then another boy who it's clear had traumatic, I don't want to say damage, but he was very traumatized as a young child, as an orphan street kid in India, and he came with a lot of psychological baggage and never really developed fully, and it was an incredibly painful reality for his adoptive parents to try to raise this very troubled boy. Anyway, Nicole Kidman's character has suffered greatly and been through a lot of trauma raising these two adopted boys. And there's a scene in the movie where Dev Patel's character comes to her and he says, and she's just kind of broken from her experience raising these boys, and he says to her, you probably didn't realize that you weren't just adopting us, you were adopting our pasts. And I was like, wow, like that. I mean, what a powerful spiritual truth there. Some of us have this fanciful idea that when we come to faith, when God adopts us as his child, he separates our sins as far as the east is from the west, and everything's forgiven. Everything. Yeah, that's true, but we still carry the wounds of the past with us. And the reality is, you go to any church or Christian community, and there are people who belong to God. They are his sons and daughters. They have been redeemed, but they also carry their past. And there's a lot of brokenness still, and a lot of damage, and a lot of messiness. And in a lot of our churches, there just isn't space to be honest about that. So for me, that was one powerful moment. And then the other thing was that Dev Patel's character assumed that his parents in Australia adopted them because they couldn't have children of their own. And she tells him through tears, I didn't adopt you because we could have had children. Right. We chose you. We wanted this. And he was just like awestruck by that.
Yeah.
And so this movie did an incredibly beautiful of revealing the sacrifices of adoption, the unglamorous realities of adoption, but also the redemptive power of adoption. And adoption has become a really, and foster parenting, all that has become I don't want to say trendy because that's so dismissive, but it's grown in awareness a lot in the Christian
Sure.
community. And I met a guy a couple years ago who was leading an effort in Colorado to help with churches to completely empty the foster care system of Colorado by getting Christian families to adopt kids. I mean, phenomenal undertaking, right? And we ran into each other by accident sometime later at an airport, I don't know where, and we were catching up. And I was asking him, like, how's it going? Like, what's the deal? And he said, the hardest part is not getting people to sign up to take care of these kids or adopt them or bring them into their home. He said the hardest part is when they realize, weeks or months into it, that this is going to be a huge mess. And like, this is not a romanticized reality like this. And then a lot of them going, we can't do this. And they turn the kids back in.
Oh, wow.
And so this film, I think, does a great job of not just showing the romantic idealism of adoption, but the messy complications of it.
Yeah.
And yet still offers this incredibly redemptive message that was phenomenal. So I thought this movie was amazing and beautiful.
I had read that he had an adopted brother, and I thought the film would just skip over that just for the ease of storytelling.
Yeah, they didn't.
Right, and I did appreciate that it wasn't a fairy tale story.
Right.
Even though it felt like it was marketed as a fairy tale story, but it was very, like you said, honest.
And it shows you and I've met some of these kids, and you see them all over the world. But children, especially young children who are not in a loving environment, can experience lifelong psychological damage, and they still need to be cared for and loved and adopted, and the families that do that are amazing. But it just breaks my heart when there are little kids like this that don't get those basic needs. And I'm just talking food and education or clothing, but the love and embrace, particularly of a mother that can nurture a young child, and without that, they have such deep psychological damage. Yeah. So it's a heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking story, but one that people need to watch and see.
Yeah, and I think the whole idea of introducing this idea, because we do live in a bubble, and unlike your kids, like my kids aren't going to India anytime soon, but just to be introduced to that idea that this exists, and a lot of that exists, even not to the degree, but it exists here, in the United States and even in our neighborhoods and so forth. And so just the idea of saying that there are other people out there besides yourselves, and working towards getting them to think less of themselves and more of others. And once again, I mean, we would not have sat down and watched this if it wasn't some type of entertaining, beautiful cinematography. The cinematography was fantastic. I thought the acting was fine. There was nothing bad about the film. It was a decent film.
It's just such a compelling story that it makes up for some of the mediocreness of parts. But but overall, really well done.
Right. But had they done a poor job telling the story, I think they would have ruined an opportunity. And I think they did. I would say good enough. To make it. This is good as a film and great as a story.
Right. I think if they had not included the subplot of his adopted brother and the psychological problems he had and the challenges for the adopted family, if they didn't show that, I probably wouldn't be recommending the movie as strongly, because it would seem a little too fairy tale, a little too clean and antiseptic. But it was just very raw and very real. And even with the main character, the dilemma he goes through in trying to, on one hand, truly honor his adoptive parents and love them, but also this longing to be reunited with his birth mother. And I mean, it was so well done and nuanced, and so I was very, obviously, John Boehner moved by
I was about to bring him.
No, that's kind of my. That's what I think about now, because I'm not a crier typically. I'm pretty even keeled. I don't get emotionally wrapped up in stuff. So when I do, I'm like, I'm having a John Boehner moment, and that's my go. I'm not gonna say I wept like a little girl. No, I wept like the Speaker of the House.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Okay, something borrowed.
Well, okay. So there was an article from the Washington Post in January
by Michael Gerson.
Yeah, which
interesting.
Okay, so. I know you know something about him.
Yeah. He was a speechwriter for George W. Bush.
Okay.
He's a Christian.
Okay.
So you'll see him on political shows from time to time offering. He's a very thoughtful guy. I don't know, what more do you need to know?
Well, and he writes for the Washington Post regularly? Is
Yeah.
that his thing?
He's a columnist, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, so this article came out. The title is What the Movie Lion Tells Us About Our Vision of Humanity. So this came out in January. I'm going to read to you just snippets that I pulled out of this article. It says, Lion raises broader issues of identity, ethnic and otherwise, that are implicated in most human stories. The questions raised by the film, who am I, where do I belong, have nearly universal resonance. And then he brings up the story of the prodigal son. It says that parable represents a spiritual revolution, God as a parent, a distant abstraction as our father and as our mother as well. No one can damage themselves beyond hope. It is possible, even as accomplished, sophisticated adults, to slip from a parent's hand and wonder whether we be found again. So I'll stop right there. And so you brought up the prodigal son and the whole idea of, in that story, the son left on his own, and Lion, through circumstances, the boy was taken from his home. But the idea of questioning, who am I, where do I belong, being damaged, and desiring to, he was obsessed with trying to find his way back home.
Yeah. And part of it, which I thought was beautiful, and he says this to his girlfriend at one point, is, my brother and my mother are looking for me, and it's been 25 years. Can you imagine the pain they're going through?
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't just, I want to find them. I know they want to find me. And he felt this need to let them know he's okay.
Yeah.
Because he could empathize with the grief they must have been going through for the 25 years. That's it's one thing to say, oh, I so long to be, in the prodigal son case, I so long to be reunited with God, but can you even begin to imagine how deeply he longs to be reunited with you? And that's something we don't usually think about.
True.
So anyway, that's another part of the movie I thought was just great.
Well, he goes on to say, but many have found comfort in that ancient story of a missing child promising a parent's unconditional love. Quote, you are my beloved, on you my favor rests. And he goes on to say, it's not an easy thing, maybe the work of a lifetime, to live as if we are loved, to act on a vision of humanity in which we are all equally loved by God. And so I thought, when I saw that film, that there were obviously, comparisons to, a relationship between me and God, and as this adult is trying to find his mother, but I just thought this was a beautiful article where it really dove into. Did you read this article?
No.
You didn't? Okay. I sent it to you.
I know. Believe me, I'm lucky I watched the whole movie. It's been a very crazy week.
But the whole idea that even as adults, that we're longing to know that we are loved and lovable, and he says to act on a vision of humanity in which we are all equally loved by God. So, I don't know. Because in this movie he was a kid, and in the article, he even goes on and says, like a lot of people might just even, scoff at this, but they just haven't really gotten to that point where they feel that need or that feel that loss. But I thought that was a universal truth of we are all lost and we're trying to find our way home. I was trying to explain this to my wife, and we were not on this going to connect, but maybe you could add to that.
Well, there's another interesting scene in the movie where Dev Patel's an adult. He's living in Tasmania or wherever he is in Australia, and he's hanging out with a bunch of fellow students in this course that he's taking, and some of the other students are from India. And he's at their apartment, and they're serving Indian food, and they're talking about Indian movies, and he realizes, like, he's totally Australian, right? He's grown up in Australia since he was probably 5 years old. He doesn't understand how to eat with naan bread rather than with forks and knives, stuff like that. So even though he looks Indian and he has an Indian name, he's not Indian. And he's having this identity crisis, and he begins asking, well, who am I? Like, where did I come from? And that kind of sets him on his journey of figuring out his hometown and where his mother is, all that sort of stuff. And it resonated with me a little bit because me and many in my family, because we're so diverse, like it's complicated. But even if you don't have some kind of unusual ethnic heritage, hopefully at some point in your adolescence or early adulthood, you start slowing down and asking the questions, who am I? And what do I really think? And where do I really come from? And not just ask that question in a sense of I need to get to know my parents better or know my family history or story better, but even on a more sort of ontological level of a deep, deep question of what makes me me, which should then lead us to questions about God and much bigger issues. But to get to Gerson's point, it is a universal desire to find out who am I, where do I belong, and am I actually worthy of love?
In the article, he talks about if anyone ever actually takes an hour of time to get in silence and think about these things, the first thing that happens is you decide to never do that again because you think of all the horrible things about yourself or whatever. It's just difficult. But encouraging people to do that, and because a lot of people just, we get busy, we're distracted. But I think, like in the movie Lion, it resonated with me, and it resonated with my, all the way to my little kids. Like my son, we were in downtown Chicago, and we were walking busy streets, and he got separated from us for 10 seconds maybe, But then when he found us, he was crying, and he latched onto us, and we felt terrible, But that whole idea of getting lost, and that was a moment in Lion where he tells his girlfriend, "I am lost."
Yeah.
And most people don't come to that kind of. In his situation, it was. There's an obvious story behind it. But most people don't come down to that type of honesty where they admit, I am a lost individual.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to spend an hour and think about that. Who am I and where did I come from?
I think I won't get the quote exactly, but Pascal said once that all of man's problems flows from an inability to stay in a room by themselves.
That's probably true.
But and I've said this in many places, that a spiritual life is predicated on silence and boredom. If you cannot be silent and be bored, you cannot have a life with God, because you can't do that deeper inner work to know what's really going on inside of me and come to terms with all of that stuff. So all the more reason why in our very loud culture with all the devices and all the media, it's that much harder to actually develop that capacity. So Gerson's absolutely right. And this movie might be a great way to, it's worth watching with your whole family, but then to take time alone and just reflect on, how am I lost? Where do I get my sense of identity? What am I really searching for? What do I believe God thinks about me? All those deeper questions that should awaken a hunger for us that isn't satisfied in the things of this world. But yeah, Gerson's a wonderful writer. I'm glad you found that article.
Okay, good.
All right, last segment. Since we've been so deep and serious, it's time for something blue. This is something that either blew our minds that we saw recently, or that blew chunks.
Yes.
All right, what have you got?
I got a blue mine.
Okay.
All right, so and this is a huge spoiler, but this movie's been out for a while, so if you missed it, too bad. But the movie Split.
I have not seen it.
Okay, so
but I've heard about it.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's not the movie that blew my mind.
Who did this movie?
M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Another Indian. Look at our theme.
Hey,
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. So he made. I'm a huge Unbreakable fan. I mentioned this early on in the podcast, and in this movie Split, it's about some guy who's got multiple personalities, and he kidnaps these girls. And I watched it with my wife, and she hated it because it gets into the gore, and I don't really like gore also. So the movie was decent.
This is about a guy with split personalities.
And he's a psychopath. At least a couple of his personalities are psychopaths, and they kidnap these girls, and he thinks he's a beast, and he's gonna. And I won't say what happens, but it leads up to this horrific event. But at the very end of the film, as there's the news media and there's news of this horrific villain, sitting at a diner is Bruce Willis from Unbreakable.
So it's a shared universe kind of movie.
Yes. And so they mentioned Mr. Glass, and the next movie is Glass. And so it's going to bring
with Samuel Jackson.
Samuel Jackson as Mr. Glass, Bruce Willis as, I can't remember his name, and then do you remember what they called him? Did you see it, Jason?
I can't recall.
They had some name. It was kind of lame, but they had a name for this guy who was kind of like this beast.
Yeah.
That rocked my world. I'm like, he's back, right? Unbreakable. I loved it so much.
That's a legitimate blow your mind kind of moment.
It blew my mind.
Okay. Well, I cannot think of anything more different than what I'm about to say. So this is what blew my mind, and that's an overstatement. This did not blow my mind, but I have found great pleasure and enjoyment in this. So my wife Amanda and I have been hooked on a show. We were looking for something to watch together. Somebody had recommended this to her, and I was like, whatever. Yeah, sure. Let's try an episode. And I haven't stopped watching it for 2 weeks. Okay.
Here it is.
This is so dumb, but I've really enjoyed it. I don't know why. It's so decompressing for me. It's on Netflix right now. The Great British Baking Show. Do you know what I'm talking about? So it's
only because my kids are into that kind of stuff. And
I know it sounds horrible. It's so stupid, but here's the deal. It's a show from the UK, the Great British Baking Show, where they bring 12 contestants on, and it's like a 10-week series, and they have to bake all this stuff, and then every week they have to say goodbye to somebody, and then it goes down, and then there's a winner at the end of the series. Okay, couple things. It all takes place in this large tent out in some English country meadow.
Is this hosted by the woman from My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
I don't think so.
Oh.
It's all Brits.
It's all Brits.
It's all Brits.
All right.
And there's two bakery chefs, these world famous bakery chefs that judge all the stuff that the contestants make. And there's an older woman whose name is Mary Berry.
I know who she is.
And a guy, another star famous baker whose name is Paul Hollywood.
Really?
And whatever came to your mind when I mentioned those names is exactly who they are. And then, of course, it's all British people who are just, I don't know, not professional bakers, but what's the non-professional word? Just
I don't know.
Yeah, amateur bakers that they've culled from throughout England, and they bring in the 12 and they bake. And it's so stupid to. There's nothing flashy. It's so understatedly British. And of course, these are all people who eat sweets all the time because they're baking cookies and crackers and cakes and puddings and all this sort of stuff. And I can't get over their teeth. I mean, it's like a graveyard after an earthquake. I mean, they're all these very sweet, wonderful people with the horrible teeth. And it's like every stereotype of England. But here's the part that really got me.
There goes our English audience.
Here's the part that really got me. Is at the end of the first series, the winner is presented this basically a trophy kind of thing, and there's this whole like celebration for that you won the show. And it ends, and Amanda and I are like, well, what did they win? Like, where's the money? Where's the check?
Where's the $1 million?
Where do they get to be like star baker at
Right.
the best restaurant in London, or what's the deal? And it didn't say anything. So I start looking up online, and it turns out they don't win anything.
Wow. That is very un-American.
Yeah, well, and they do this. The way it's set up is they do a weekend. They do this for 10 weekends. So these people show up every weekend, and they do. And yeah, that's my thought. Was this would never happen in America?
Do they get into the sad stories of how the dad died and wanted them to be a baker?
No.
See, that's very American.
Yeah,
right
they
there.
don't do that. I mean, they give you some little background glimpses into each of their lives, but it's very surfacey. Like, and there's no it's so understated.
Yeah.
But I mean, it has not blown my mind. It's not like, but it's.
Well, you've been hooked.
I find it so relaxing and enjoyable.
Okay.
And it's so rare to have that kind of understated simplicity. And it's fun. I mean, they're funny personalities and interesting. So if you need something to just unwind and enjoy the Great British Baking Show.
Okay, I think they had Mary Berry on an American version of that, which was hosted by the woman who was
may be.
And
I would not watch the American version.
Yeah, my kids were watching it. It wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't.
No,
very good.
I thoroughly enjoyed the British version.
Oh wow!
So,
All right.
Anyway,
well, I'm going to watch Gandhi before I watch the Great British Bake Off.
Baking Show.
Oh, whatever. So
get it right. Get it right.
Gandhi. I'm going to watch Gandhi.
Okay. Reminder: this episode has been brought to you by What's Wrong with Religion: 9 Things No One Told You About Faith. This book, I really honestly wrote it for people who are struggling with faith and disillusioned with their experience in the church. It will help put things into perspective. And let me give you some of the 9 things that are actually, because they're all the chapter titles, are the 9 things no one's told you. So number 1 is everyone is religious. Everyone. Everyone, including the
I don't
so-called
believe that. I'll
non-religious.
read the book.
Chapter 2 is how religion ruins the world.
Amen to that.
Yeah. Chapter 3, however, is how getting rid of religion doesn't help.
That's confusing.
So God does not exist to be used, and neither do you. The radical life isn't what you think. So some of the titles, but it will help in a very visual, simple way and humorous at times explain the realities of faith. And Jason did a ton of work for me on this book, helping. I did the illustrations, but he actually got them to the point where they could be published. So I appreciate that.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of cleanup and stuff. So
And I bought a copy.
it is very. You could probably read it in an hour, hour and a half. It's not super long, but very visual. If you're not a big reader but enjoy thinking deeply, this is for you. You can get them at what'swrongwithreligion.com or Amazon, but go to what'swrongwithreligion.com. The price is actually better at what'swrongwithreligion.com. And yeah, we'll be talking about this in future episodes, but help us out, keep the podcast going, support our stuff. Josh, anything you want to plug?
No, well, I will say most listeners probably are familiar with the Phil Vischer podcast, which is the reason we're here to begin with.
Kind of spawned us.
Right. And so just thank you to all Patreon subscribers. And if you don't know what that is, go to philvischer.com.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Go to patreon.com.
/Phil Vischer.
Phil Vischer.
Yeah.
There you go.
Give us your thoughts on Cloak and Dagger, Gandhi, Lion, Split, and the Great British Baking Show. One of these things is not like the others. Thank you for watching. Until next time, you can kiss this episode goodbye.
On your marks, get set. Bake!
Welcome back to the movie proposal. I am Skye Jitani. I didn't start the right way. We have to start with the
Dearly beloved.
I apologize. Dearly beloved, welcome back to that. You still didn't do it right. I don't get it this time.
Oh, we're gonna include all this.
Sorry. No, we're not.